Sorry, guest list only, the bouncer said, arms crossed like stone. I watched from inside the velvet rope, standing near the champagne table, wrapped in a black satin gown that hugged every inch of the woman I'd become. And there he was, Ethan Myers. The same Ethan who used to host every college party, the one who never looked twice at me. Back then, I was just that girl in the hoodie, the quiet one sitting in the corner, sipping Sprite while everyone else played beer pong and danced under fairy lights. Now, he was outside, and I was the one inside. He stepped closer, squinting through the glass, probably wondering if it was really me. I didn't smile. I didn't wave. I just turned my back and walked away. Because the truth is, he never saw me when it mattered. And now that he does, it's far too late. My name is Madeline Carter, but for most of my teenage and early college years, I was just that girl in the background. Not the girl you remembered. Not the one you noticed when she walked into a room. I was the girl holding someone else's phone to take a picture. The one who always offered to help set up and never got tagged in the group photo. I grew up in Savannah, Georgia, where social circles were tight and reputations even tighter. In high school, I wasn't unpopular, I just wasn't relevant. I got good grades, played clarinet in the school band, and worked part-time at a bookstore downtown. That pretty much summed up my identity. Then there was Ethan Myers. He was the golden boy. Varsity soccer. Blue eyes. Laugh that made people lean in. His parents were loaded. His dad owned a chain of car dealerships across Georgia and the Carolinas, and his mom was a real estate agent with perfect hair and pearls. Ethan threw house parties like he was hosting award shows. The lights, the music, the kegs. He always wore cologne that smelled like cedar and expensive gum. People practically worshipped him. We went to the same school from 9th grade to college, and I swear, not once in all those years did he ever say my name. Not once. There was this one night, junior year of high school, when I somehow ended up at one of his house parties. My friend Lena begged me to go. You never have fun, she said, tugging on my hoodie. You never do anything. I let her talk me into it. I remember standing in the kitchen, clutching a plastic cup of flat Coke, watching everyone dance under the glow of neon lights and flickering phone screens. Ethan walked by, laughing, arms slung around two cheerleaders like it was just another Saturday. I froze. Not because I was starstruck, but because I wanted to be noticed. And he brushed past me like I was air. Not even a glance. I left early that night. Told Lena I had a headache. Cried in the Uber. That became a pattern. I'd show up, hover at the edges of rooms I wasn't really invited to, then leave with my chest full of words I didn't say. College didn't help. We both went to Georgia State University, and somehow, even on a campus with thousands of people, he still found a way to make me feel small. He was in a fraternity, Delta Tau Chi or something obnoxious like that. Their house was always the scene of Friday night madness. Loud music, solo cups stacked like pyramids, people spilling out onto the lawn. I lived in an off-campus apartment with a roommate who barely spoke English and a leaky bathroom ceiling. One night, sophomore year, I worked up the nerve to go to a party at the Delta house. Lena was already inside. She waved at me from the balcony, mouthing, "Come up." So I walked in, heart pounding, wearing my best jeans and a top I'd saved up for. I made it halfway across the living room when I saw him. Ethan. He was leaning against the kitchen counter, beer in hand, wearing a backwards cap and laughing at some joke that probably wasn't funny. I stood there, unsure whether to wave or smile. And then he looked right through me. Literally, like I was a chair or a piece of wall art. His gaze landed on a girl behind me, and he walked past me again. Just like before. That was the night I decided I was done trying. But even though I stayed out of the spotlight, I never stopped building. When I wasn't in class, I was freelancing, designing logos, managing small business social media accounts, teaching myself video editing and branding. I started a small online store for digital templates and planners. It didn't make much at first, but I kept pushing. Lena used to joke, "One day you're going to be rich and famous, and Ethan's going to regret not saying hi." I always laughed, but a part of me clung to that idea, not because I wanted revenge, but because I wanted to believe I mattered. There was a Thanksgiving break during senior year. Lena invited me to her family's beach house. We were sitting on the balcony, feet up on the railing, drinking hot cocoa from oversized mugs. She asked me, "Do you still think about him?" I shook my head.
No.
He doesn't even know I exist.
She leaned in. That's the thing, Mads.
One day he will. And when he does, it'll be too late. I smiled then, not because I believed her, but because it felt good to imagine a world where someone like Ethan had to knock on my door. Fast forward a few years. After graduation, I moved to Atlanta and went full-time into branding and digital marketing. It was hard at first. I lived off instant ramen and made client calls in pajamas. But I got better, sharper. My templates went viral on Pinterest. A few of my videos hit over 100,000 views. Brands started reaching out. I launched a creative agency called Woven Bloom. The name was cheesy, but it meant something to me: growth and artistry intertwined. By year 3, I had a team of 5, a downtown office, and a waiting list of clients. One morning, while scrolling through Instagram, I saw a story from someone I hadn't heard from in years. Ethan Myers. He was promoting his new business venture, a clothing line that looked like it was designed by AI and marketed by frat boys. But it had money behind it, probably from his dad. I clicked through the stories. One of them was a party flyer, some high-profile networking event for creatives and entrepreneurs in Atlanta, hosted by one of the sponsors I worked with. My name was on the guest list. His wasn't. The night of the event arrived like a quiet storm. The venue, the Sable Room, a converted art gallery turned elite event space in downtown Atlanta. White marble floors, hanging crystal lights, a live jazz trio. Everything screamed exclusivity. Velvet ropes, security detail, valet parking. You didn't just walk in. You were invited. I arrived early, nervous in a way I hadn't been in years. Not because I felt unworthy, but because this was the first time I truly felt like I belonged. I wore a champagne-colored silk dress that caught the light when I moved. My hair, styled in a sleek twist bun, was pinned with a gold comb I'd bought the week before, a small splurge, a quiet reward to myself. As I walked in, a few heads turned. A photographer snapped a candid shot. Inside, I was greeted by Clarissa Grant, a publicist who'd once been on the cover of Forbes Women Under 30. She hugged me like we were old friends. "Madeline," she beamed, "you have to meet the founder of Lux House. They're obsessed with your brand aesthetic." For the next hour, I floated, cocktails in hand, business cards exchanged, warm smiles from people I respected. Not a trace of the insecurity I once wore like a second skin. I was no longer trying to fit in. I was in. That's when I saw him. Ethan Myers. Standing outside the glass entrance, wearing a tight-fitted navy jacket and a sheepish expression. His hands were in his pockets, but the slight bounce in his shoes told me he was nervous. He wasn't on the list. From my vantage point, behind the velvet rope and inside the glow of chandeliers, I watched him approach the security team. He gestured to his phone, probably showing an RSVP that didn't exist. One of the event managers stepped in, shook his head, and pointed toward the sidewalk. Ethan's brows furrowed. He tried to explain, to reason. I saw the slight tilt of his head, the "don't you know who I am?" energy that once carried him through life effortlessly. But not tonight. Tonight, the doors stayed closed. He looked up, through the glass.
And he saw me.
For a moment, our eyes locked, and I wondered what he saw. Did he recognize the girl he used to walk past? The one he never noticed? The girl in oversized sweatshirts and chipped nail polish, holding her breath on the edges of every party. Because I didn't see that girl anymore.
I saw me now. Poised.
Centered.
Whole.
I didn't smirk. I didn't wave. I simply turned away. Not out of arrogance, but because I had nothing left to prove. I'd already won. Later that evening, while sipping on sparkling water near the gallery's sculpture wall, I overheard a conversation that made my stomach tighten. He tried using his dad's name to get in, someone laughed. Told them he'd been to bigger events than this. Classic entitled energy. Someone else added, "Funny. He couldn't even get a +1 invite." You'd think he'd learned by now that clout doesn't equal credibility. I didn't join the conversation. I just listened quietly. It wasn't bitterness I felt. It was detachment. For years, I thought I wanted revenge. I fantasized about the moment he'd regret everything, all the dismissals, the invisibility. But standing there, surrounded by people who respected me for me, I realized I didn't want revenge. I just wanted peace. And now I had it. 2 days later, I got a DM from a familiar handle at Ethan, a Myers _ Ethan, hey, didn't get a chance to say hi the other night. That was your event, right? Looks like you're killing it. Would love to catch up sometime. Maybe grab coffee? I stared at the screen. Years ago, a message like that would have lit up my world. I'd have shown Lena, dissected every word, tried to read between the lines.
Now?
I didn't even open it. I archived the conversation and went back to finalizing client deliverables. That night I called Lena. Guess who tried to slide into my DMs? I said, laughing into the phone.
No.
No, she gasped. Don't tell me it's... Yep. Madeline Carter, she said dramatically. You are living the movie. We both laughed until we couldn't breathe. But deep down, I knew this wasn't a movie.
There was no soundtrack playing.
No dramatic confrontation. Just quiet power. Silent dignity. And the reality that sometimes the sweetest closure is no closure at all. He had his chance. He ignored me at parties. Now, he can't get in. After that night, something in me shifted. Not out of pride, but from clarity. There was no dramatic mic drop. No revenge plan. Just silence. A full, blooming silence that filled the spaces I used to try to earn love in. I started deleting contacts I hadn't spoken to in years. Not out of anger, but because I no longer needed dead weight in my phone. People who only reached out when they needed something. People who never clapped when I won. People who once made me feel invisible. Ethan's name was among them. Block.
Delete. Breathe.
For the first time in my life, I stopped explaining myself. I didn't post about the event. I didn't write a caption about being unbothered. I just moved. Moved in silence. Moved with focus. I poured myself into my agency, Woven Bloom, like it was sacred soil. I hired 2 new designers, both women of color, who reminded me of my younger self. Full of talent, overlooked, hungry for opportunity. I gave them space to grow.
To shine.
We took on new clients, women-owned businesses, ethical brands, artists trying to find their voices. It was no longer just a business. It was a movement. And every time we launched a new campaign or saw a client's revenue double, I felt something deepen inside me. Not pride, but peace. A month after the party, I got invited to speak at a private women in business retreat in Napa Valley. Flights covered. Suite provided. All expenses paid. As I stood in front of a room full of entrepreneurs and creatives, women with fire in their eyes and journals full of dreams, I told them the truth. You don't need to chase the people who don't see you. You don't need to squeeze yourself into spaces where you're only tolerated. You are allowed to walk away and still win. The room was silent. And then it wasn't. Applause, nods, tears. Women saw themselves in my story. Not because it was flashy, but because it was theirs too. Back home, I made some changes. I closed my personal Instagram for a while. Logged out of all social apps. Not for dramatic effect, but because I realized I was addicted to being seen by people who never really saw me. I didn't want to perform healing. I wanted to live it. I got back into painting, something I hadn't done since high school. I filled 2 entire canvases in a weekend and didn't show them to anyone. Just me, the paint, and the quiet music in the background. I walked in the park again. Bought myself fresh flowers every Sunday. Started therapy. Told my inner child that she didn't have to try so hard anymore. One afternoon, while going through old boxes in my closet, I found a journal from my freshman year of college. Inside, there were entries filled with desperation. Why doesn't anyone invite me? What's wrong with me? Maybe if I lost weight, changed my clothes, laughed more. I held that notebook like it was a fragile version of me and whispered, you didn't need to change. You just needed to outgrow them. I didn't reach out to anyone from college. I didn't attend reunions. I didn't drop "look at me now" breadcrumbs. Not because I didn't want them to know I made it, but because I no longer cared if they knew. My worth wasn't up for public vote anymore. There was something sacred in that quiet detachment. No announcement. No revenge post. Just deleted numbers. Cancelled Christmas invites to people who never returned the energy. Unfollowed without bitterness. Unsubscribed from pain. I created boundaries, real ones. Lena was still in my life. We had monthly brunches where we belly laughed about everything. She'd say, "Girl, do you remember how you used to shrink for that man?" And I'd laugh, because it was true, and it was over. A few weeks later, I got an email. Subject: panel invitation. Women disrupting creative spaces. From Clarissa Grant. Madeline, we'd love to have you as one of our headline speakers. It's a closed-door summit, by invitation only. No press. No PR fluff. Just real conversation. Let me know if you're in. I read it twice. I was being invited to spaces people like Ethan couldn't even imagine. Not because I forced my way in, but because I'd finally stopped knocking. For the first time, my silence wasn't fear. It was freedom. After that New Year's Eve party, something inside me flipped like a switch. I stopped letting rejection sit on my chest like dead weight. I picked it up, studied it, and turned it into fire. The more I thought about all the times Ryan had looked right through me like I was invisible, the more it pushed me. Not for revenge, but for reinvention. I started small, new clothes, updated hairstyle, and a gym membership I actually used. But it wasn't just the physical stuff. I threw myself into things I'd always been too scared to try. I applied for a summer internship at one of the top graphic design firms in New York. I got it. I networked. I learned. I built a portfolio that finally reflected the talent I'd been hiding behind shyness and oversized hoodies. Every win added a new layer to me, a new shine I didn't even know I could wear. People started noticing me, not because I was loud or trying to be someone I wasn't, but because I was finally owning who I was. My social circle changed, too. I stopped trying to orbit people like Ryan and started surrounding myself with those who saw me. My roommate, Ava, became one of my biggest cheerleaders. "Girl, you've been leveling up in silence," she said one night while scrolling through my revamped Instagram feed. "It's giving boss energy." I laughed, but deep down I felt it. I wasn't the same girl who lingered in doorways at parties, hoping for a glance. One night, about a year later, Ava and I were invited to a major alumni networking gala hosted by the university. It was being held at one of the trendiest rooftop venues in LA, the kind that had a velvet rope, a list, and a line. I wore a sleek black jumpsuit, my hair in soft waves, and a quiet confidence that came from building something real. As we approached the entrance, I recognized someone in line. It was Ryan. He looked the same. Same swagger. Same air of arrogance. But this time, it didn't faze me. I smiled politely and turned toward the bouncer, who greeted me by name. I had helped design the event branding. I was on the list, not as a guest, but as a creative collaborator. Ryan's eyes widened as the bouncer unclipped the rope and waved me in. "Whoa, Ellie?" "Ellie Turner," he asked, stepping forward. "Hey, long time no see." I paused, looked him dead in the eye, and with the softest, calmest voice I'd ever used, I said, "Sorry. This event's for people who know how to see others." Then I walked in, past the rope, past the line, past the girl I used to be. The day of the alumni gala arrived. It wasn't just any reunion. It was the event of the year, hosted by Manhattan's most exclusive art circle, celebrating young leaders in creativity, culture, and business. And I had been chosen as the guest of honor. The girl who used to stand at the walls during college parties was now curating spaces that celebrities lined up to enter. As the spotlight bathed the entrance of the art house venue, camera flashes lit up the red carpet. My team buzzed around, making sure everything was perfect. The security had a guest list tighter than a vault. Only the best got in tonight. That's when I saw him. Blake Peterson, in a cheap blazer, nervously smoothing his hair, standing outside in line. I blinked. For a moment I thought I was imagining it. The guy who used to look right through me while pouring drinks for his entourage was now pacing back and forth in front of a velvet rope. I nudged my assistant. Can you check if that's Blake Peterson trying to get in without an invite? She returned within seconds, suppressing a smirk.
Yep.
He's not on the list. He said he's a friend of the host. Wanted to know if that would work. I took a slow breath. No, I said simply. Not tonight. Security informed him with a calm but firm tone. I'm sorry, sir. If you're not on the list, we can't let you in. He protested. But I know her. Harper Morgan. We were close. I stepped forward. Not in a rush.
Calm. Composed.
The cameras turned. I looked him straight in the eyes. You knew of me, I said coolly. You never actually saw me. He went quiet. His charm melted in front of everyone. People around paused, recognizing the scene. Phones discreetly captured the moment. It was cinematic. Poetic. You used to ignore me like I didn't belong, I added. Now you don't. Then I turned my back to him and walked into the venue, the doors closing behind me like a full stop on an old chapter. Inside, I was welcomed with applause, laughter, and recognition, not just for what I had accomplished, but for who I had become. Harper Morgan. No longer the invisible girl. Now the one who decided who gets in.